right, we've got some Miami Dolphins news to talk about. Look, obviously the Dolphins coming off a bye week, heading into a kind of a critical matchup against a now 500 Raiders football team. And the Dolphins are making some big time roster moves that I think it kind of sounds small, but I think it will potentially have a big impact in the short and maybe the long term as well. Let's pull up the report. This is from NBC Sports. The Dolphins have moved on from one of their offensive players. Miami announced on yesterday, that the club has waived receiver Robbie Chosen. Chosen, formerly known as Robbie Anderson, joined the Dolphins as a free agent in April and was signed to the practice squad after training camp. Chosen has not been incredibly active for the Miami Dolphins. Of course, had the one big play, I believe, against the Denver Broncos. But other than that, has been limited as of the time of this recording, Friday afternoon. There have been no reports of anyone else picking up Chosen. There's a lot of strategy that the Dolphins waived Chosen to open up a roster spot for rookie Devon Achane to get into the fold. Achane, obviously a big-time playmaker, in that the Miami Dolphins, after Chosen clears waivers, for those of you who aren't familiar, when a player is waived, the other 31 teams have a chance to pick him up and add him to their roster or practice squad. If a player isn't picked up by one of those 31 teams, the team that waived them can add the player, in this case Chosen, back to their practice squad. It looks like that's what the Dolphins are planning to do in this situation. There is, again, as of the time of this recording, no team has picked up Chosen, which means I think he'll be headed back to the Dolphins practice squad, which I think is a really great move, because this is just a classic example of elevating Achane, right? You get the roster spot to add your big-time young playmaker into the fold, but you also have the option to keep the veteran Chosen on your roster in terms of being on the practice squad for a playoff push if you have injuries at the receiver position. I think these are two kind of really sneaky good roster moves for the Miami Dolphins. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this situation with Miami Mice, but before I hand it over to you, Dolphins fans, like I mentioned, big game against the Raiders, coming off a bye. You want to put the bad taste of that Chiefs loss away forever. Chance to do it against a Raiders team that's looking a little feisty. Give us your prediction. Raiders, Dolphins, final score in the comment section below. But Mice, what do you think of these moves going on for the Dolphins and the addition of Achane back into the offense potentially?
Yeah, Nick, I think it's a really interesting move, especially when you look at the comments from the Jets, Chosen's former team, head coach Robert Saleh. He says any guy with a fastball is worth looking at. And when you think about it, I mean, it does make sense. What would you rather have? Like a backup wide receiver who comes into the fold, who's serviceable, he's okay, he's never really going to live up to any of the starters or anything like that? Or would you like to have a guy who's had elite speed, maybe not the best receiver, but there's always that opportunity, like you alluded to in the Broncos game, where he catches one and takes it 68 yards for a touchdown or something like that. I think it's a very intriguing option to keep banging around, especially when you are the Dolphins, and especially if a guy like Achane comes back. If you have Tyreek Hill, Achane on the field, and then all of a sudden you have to get a guy like Chosen Anderson in there, that is when things look really interesting for this guy, because it opens him up to do what he does best. He's purely a long ball threat. That's really all that he has in his bag. He's not really a top tier receiver anymore. This is a guy who can take one to the house really long, like you said, in a playoff push. That would be the best option for him these days. So I think this is a good move by the Dolphins. He really wasn't doing too much for them right now on the roster, but I think it's worth, if and I think he will make it through waivers and get to this practice squad for the Dolphins. This is a guy that's worth having around, because there's still that little bit of value left in his game that's intriguing enough. Like you said, any guy with a fastball is worth investigating, intriguing enough to keep him around to see what he can maybe contribute if needed.
And this is actually just breaking my, according to X or Twitter, whatever the heck it is, Omar Kelly, who's a reporter for the Dolphins as part of SI.com, has said Robbie Chosen has not been claimed by any of the other teams, and that Mike McDaniel has already said that re-signing him to the practice squad is the team's goal. So it looks like Chosen is headed back to the Dolphins practice squad. Achane most likely elevated to take his roster spot. And I agree with you, because one of the things people forget is that when injuries hit, and Dolphins fans, you guys are obviously very well aware of this, is that when you have to throw guys in to fill in, if you don't have guys that can execute the offense, just know the plays, you're in trouble. We've seen it a lot of times with playoff teams in the past. They have one or two guys go down, they're forced to throw in special team guys into the fold, and then the offense just completely evaporates. Or if it's defensive injuries, the defense completely evaporates. You bring in a guy like Chosen back onto your practice squad in this case because he knows the offense. He knows his role in the offense, and he knows just the play calls. The play gets called in the huddle. He knows what to do because he's executed the offense all season long on the practice squad. You practice, right? You just don't dress with the team. So again, you're going to be in the game plans. You're going to be with the team. You're going to get in the rhythm with Tua and the other quarterbacks and the other receivers. You're going to know the play call terminology. All that's going to be on top of mind, that if you have injuries at the wide receiver position, you can elevate a guy like Chosen and he can come in and fill, and you can actually execute your offense. Because that's one of the things I think people forget. And I see it every playoff season, right? Every time you get to that point in the year, a team has a game where they're down 2 guys or whatever, and they have to elevate some practice squad guys like an undrafted free agent, and the guy just can't play, just doesn't know what's going on, and the offense just can't execute. You bring Chosen back into the fold, so that way, if that happens, you can still execute your offense. Obviously, you want to be at full strength, but if you're not, you still want to be able to at least run your base plays. And that's what bringing Chosen back into the fold can do. And look, we all know what A-Chain brings. This guy's an elite level playmaker, elite level speed. So adding him activated into the roster just gives the Dolphins another weapon back into the fold. But I think this is just sound strategic decision making from the Miami Dolphins. This is the time of the year where you have to pay very fine attention to the details if you're working on your roster. You don't want to release a guy and then lose him to waivers that you're hoping to get back. Credit to the Dolphins for timing this correctly. And it seems like, according to this latest report, that they did get it done. So again, credit to Miami. Strong roster moves, strong decision making, and I think it'll have a good impact for them as we work towards the second half of the season.